Hello, welcome to the Holistic Healer Podcast, a podcast dedicated to all things holistic. I am your host, Cheryl Lee. Today's guest is Loren Lockman. He is the founder of Tanglewood Wellness and Fasting Center, an academy for vibrant living. He has been a raw vegan for over 30 years. We sit down today to discuss water fasting, juicing, preparing for water fasting, supervision, and so much more. Enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Holistic Healer Podcast. I am your host, Cheryl Lee. And today's guest, so excited, Loren Lockman. I'm so excited to have you on. He is the founder of the Tanglewood Wellness and Fasting Center. And you also have the Academy for Vibrant Living. And you have been raw vegan for over 30 years. Is that right?
Yeah, coming up on 32 in a couple months.
Oh my goodness. Wow. That is so amazing. That's great. Yeah. So cool. So I normally like to just kind of start with a little backstory and a journey as to what got you to the founder of Tanglewood Fasting and Wellness Center.
Well, it's probably going to sound familiar because my guess is it's a similar story to many other people.
Okay.
What happened was, in my case, I got sick at 23. I was about 6 months out of college. I didn't know anything other than conventional medicine. I grew up outside of Washington, D.C., and it's pretty conservative medically. At least it was back then. This is back in the late 1800s.
Okay.
And so all I knew was conventional medicine. Well, I got much worse with 3 years of medical care. And that finally opened my eyes, and I thought, okay, I realized these guys really don't have a clue what they're talking about. They're just suppressing symptoms. It's not making me healthier. And so I looked around, and it long story short, I wound up realizing that every species on the planet fasts when it's sick enough or badly enough injured. That fasting is nature's way of allowing the organism to heal itself. Yeah. And it's important to point out, Cheryl Lee, and I think you already know this, but while I think there's a lot of confusion around this out there, because I hear people talking about all the things that healed them.
Yes.
But the simple fact is that healing is a biological process, which means the only thing that can heal your body is your body.
Right.
That's it. Fasting is so powerful when it's done properly and long enough because we're simply giving the organism the optimal conditions to cleanse and heal. When we do that, amazing things happen.
Yeah, for sure. And so your background then, like up until that point, was it kind of a standard American diet then, really?
Yeah, yes and no.
Okay.
I had an awakening when I was 14, actually. I grew 10 inches that year without gaining a pound.
Wow.
And so I look like a stick with a nose.
Okay.
And, I was a skinny kid, how kids grow at that age. And the hormones are kicking in. I'm wanting girls to find me attractive. I look like a stick with a nose. So I thought, maybe if I pay attention to nutrition, learn something about nutrition and work out, maybe I can build some muscle. And so that was sort of my introduction to nutrition. Now, of course, initially I was basically studying conventional nutrition, which I have long since walked away from.
Sure.
But it got me interested in health in a way I never had been before. And so my diet began to change. I think I was in college when I realized that I needed to be a vegetarian, but that I wasn't quite ready yet.
Right.
And so at 23 I got sick. 26 is when I walked away from medicine. It took me 6 months to realize that I needed to stop eating animals and give up all processed foods.
Wow.
And those two changes alone were so dramatic that the change in my health was so great that people come up to me and say, "My God, you look amazing.
Yeah.
What did you do?" People that knew me.
Yeah, right.
Can you help me? Can you help my parent, my child, my partner? And I started helping people as much as I could while running another business that I wasn't paying much more attention to.
Wow.
After about 5 years, I thought, okay, it's not a good way to pay the bills.
Yeah.
I'll close that company. I was in the commercial real estate business. I'm going to close that. I'm going to focus 100% on helping people. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Wow. So once you gave up like animal products and you kind of made that shift into like raw foods, obvious, maybe were you including some cooked food at that time, but
Yes,
vegan?
initially I still ate cooked food,
Okay.
and it's a little bit embarrassing because what occurred to me early on, again, I mentioned that I realized that all animals in nature fast. Well, I started fasting around the same time, and I started thinking about what was natural for the human body.
Yeah.
And I realized, I mean, and I know, in fact, I heard on one of your podcasts, a conversation about how it's different for different people.
Right.
Yes and no. I mean,
Hmm.
certainly to some extent, there's some truth there. My body loves watermelon, and I can eat it every day, and
Right.
I have eaten it almost every day now for 25 years. It's one of two meals that I eat most days. But while somebody else might not like watermelon or feel like
Right.
they're eating, but every species on the planet, 25 million animal species, have a species-specific diet.
Right.
It seems pretty unlikely to me that we're the one out of 25 million where your diet's different than mine.
Right.
I think we're all meant to eat a fruit-based diet. We're frugivores,
Yep.
fruit and soft leaves. Again, the specifics of that are going to vary just as they do with other species, right?
For
But
sure.
but I think that the backbone's the same. So in any case, I had this epiphany that I needed to figure out what was natural for my body. And it's embarrassing to say it took me about 5 years to realize cooking isn't natural.
Yeah.
And so I kept eating cooked food for about 5 years. And then I thought, well, in fact, I was at a health conference. I started going to health conferences, learning as much as I could.
Sure.
I'm at a health conference and I'm walking down the sidewalk from one building to another to go to a lecture.
Yep.
And I overhear as I walk by just a little bit of this conversation. And I don't know who they were. I never saw them again. I kept walking, but I heard one person say to the other one, "Raw food." And I thought,
Mm.
of course,
Wow. It just
of
clicked for
course.
you.
Yeah, it's like a light bulb moment. And
Wow.
now I realized, okay, you know what? I'm not doing any more cooked food.
Yeah.
It
Wow.
actually took me a few weeks to implement it, but
It was almost like a divine intervention, honestly, like for
it
you to
was.
hear,
Yeah,
right, to hear that, and then it completely changed the
it,
trajectory of your
it did.
course.
It really did. It was amazing
Yeah.
what happened. And it's interesting. I mean, I think you can understand this. I hope your listeners can understand this. I think not everyone does, but getting as sick as I did, and I was the sickest person I knew when I was in
Wow.
my early to mid 20s. For 3 years, I could barely do anything. I had a job, but I actually bought a house 6 or 8 blocks from the office so I could get up at 8:30 in the morning and be in the office by 9.
Wow.
And then I'd go home and I'd basically be in bed, for 12 to 14 hours a day
Wow.
for 3 years. And this is with medical care, right? And
Right.
finally, I woke up and said, no, this is not okay.
No.
Um, yeah, but yeah, I mean, this getting this sick was one of the best things that ever happened to me because it completely changed the trajectory of my life from
Yeah.
nothing. And if
Well,
I
yeah.
hadn't done that, I mean, I have way back a couple of years ago, I was posting once a week. I was doing a live broadcast back during the height of the pandemic.
Uh-huh.
And um, an old friend of mine wrote to me and said, you scare me because I was saying this is nonsense. Don't wear masks. This is harmful to you. Don't
Mhm.
take the vaccine. He's like, you're scaring me, man. You should be listening to what they're telling us. I'm like, yeah, definitely not.
Yeah.
And at some
Anything they
point,
say, I'm doing the exact opposite of.
pretty much, but he made a comment, and then I thought to myself, I said to him, "Are you stoned?" And he said, "Is it obvious?" I said, "Yeah, I'll talk to you sometime when you're not stoned."
Right.
He never gave up. I mean, back when I was 16, 17, 18, we smoked a lot
Wow.
of pot together. We drank a lot of alcohol. But I, fortunately walked away from all of that
Yeah.
at 25 and have not had a drop of alcohol, none of these substances. Again, an amazing thing that probably never would have happened had I not gotten sick.
That's amazing. So just because I'm just so interested. So from having your job in real estate to actually making the move to Costa Rica, buying the property that you now run, had you done a water fast yourself? You had actually
Oh
done
yeah.
that?
Oh
Yes.
no. I should say. So I started fasting myself nearly 35 years ago.
Okay.
Tanglewood, just in March, we celebrated our 27th anniversary.
Wow.
So I had 8 years experience.
Yep.
I was fasting myself multiple times per year, really too much.
Yep.
because, and this is going to be a shock to some younger listeners, but we had no internet back then,
Yeah.
right?
What?
Yeah. My guide was a guy who'd been dead for years. I was reading a book,
Yeah.
and he was talking about people going weeks without food. The first book I came across was, no, I can't think of what it's called.
Is it Arnold Ehret's Rational
It,
Fasting?
it was Arnold Ehret's book.
Yeah. Hmm.
Exactly. That was the first one. And then I wound up coming across Herbert Shelton's work.
Hmm.
He's the one I more align myself with, more of a
Right.
hygiene perspective.
Yeah.
But anyway, here are these guys talking about going weeks without food, and it sounded, I mean, it made sense, but it also sounded a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I'd had no idea anyone could survive weeks without food.
Yeah. Especially at that age.
Well, exactly. So,
Yeah.
I grew up with some background in fasting. I'm Jewish, but only on my parents' side,
Yep.
both parents. And
Yeah.
so as you may know, we fast once a year.
Yeah.
I'd done that, many times growing up, but I didn't really know if I could go 2 days. So I parked myself close to the fridge and fasted for 2 days. And when I survived that, I tried 4, and then I tried 8. And I
Wow.
worked
Yeah.
my way up until I was fasting weeks at a time. And I made a lot of mistakes, and it probably took me much longer than it should have. But
Yeah.
by the time I fasted my first client, I had already fasted more than 30 times for
Wow.
weeks at a time. I've
Wow.
now fasted about 3.5 years of my life cumulatively, and have guided more than 10,000 people through fasts averaging
Amazing.
26 days. But I mean, it's crazy to me. I've got clients, some of you might be listening right now, who've done 1, 2, 3 fasts, guided supervised fasts, and think they know enough to guide other people through the process.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah. I can only imagine,
Yeah.
this is like a lifetime kind of working towards this, being able to hold space. It's not just, I would imagine, and we'll get into it, but there's so much more than just like even the fasting aspect. I mean, there's got to be, you're dealing with people in their healing crises, both physical and emotional stuff's coming
Yeah.
up. I mean, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts, I'm sure.
There are, and to be honest, I mean, sometimes it's more than I'm prepared for too.
Yes,
Sometimes it can be overwhelming. Some people
I
can be
bet.
challenging, but it's been amazing having had the privilege of
Yeah.
working with them and seeing amazing things happening over and over and over again. It's an
Yeah.
incredible.
How fulfilling.
Yeah.
How amazing is that? So I thought it might be good to kind of just set the stage right now, because I see right now there's so much juice feasting, extended juicing, like, 120 days, and it's kind of everywhere.
I did that.
Yeah.
I did
Yeah.
120 days.
Yeah. Long time. Well, we'll call it juice feasting, right? When you're
Right,
taking
right.
in that much juice. And so I feel like there's some confusion on, there's also a lot of talk about the mucoid plaque and removing that, and that you can go ahead and just do that with juicing, and juicing is superior because you can carry on with your daily activities and you don't have to rest. So I thought it might be a good place to just kind of set the stage. The differences between water fasting and juice feasting, and
Sure.
how that relates to, the actual detoxification and cleansing of the body, not only just for like diseases, like serious diseases like cancer and arthritis and these types of things, but just people who are looking to, some people go into these things just for wanting to lose a few pounds. So can you kind of like give us a bit of the differences between the two?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that maybe the key. In fact, I mentioned it already, and I'm called all kinds of names because I've been repeating the same mantra for years,
Mm-hmm.
and that is, we can never improve on nature.
Yeah.
We have these incredible bodies, this amazing organism. I would say that this organism is the single most magnificent thing on the planet. Yours might be number 2. I don't know.
Probably.
Um, the human body is truly incredible, right? It has
Right.
this incredible, virtually infinite intelligence. So what we need to do, and it's funny, someone said to me the other day, a doctor whose name you might know, I won't mention his name, says that health is so mysterious. I'm like, no, health is not at all mysterious.
Yeah.
Okay? The way to an amazing level of health is actually really clear. I mean, it's not clear to everybody, but
Yeah.
it's a clear and simple path. We get the garbage out of the body that we've put in there over all the years that, it's gotten stuck in our bodies
Yep.
just from living in society, from living on this modern world. And then we meet all of our bodies the way that nature intended. And we can't improve on that.
Right.
Right. And so, I ask people, can we agree that apples and oranges and maybe carrots, I don't know, lettuce, melons, can we agree these are ideal foods to the human body? Can we agree they're perfect foods to the human body?
Right.
Okay. How do we improve on perfection?
Yeah.
You can't.
You
If
can't.
we run them through a machine, what we get isn't better than what we started with.
Gotcha.
Now, it's more nutrient dense. And, again, if those people that have followed me for a while have probably seen this before, but years ago, I had just completed I think it was actually an introductory lecture, like a 2-hour lecture outside of Washington, D.C. And the woman had a bunch of questions. I answered her questions. And then I said to her, "You drink a lot of carrot juice, don't you?" And she said, "Yeah, how'd you know?" I said, "Well, you're orange." Her skin was orange.
Orange, yeah. That's happened to me before too.
Right. And she said, "Oh, that's because I'm detoxifying." And I said, "I don't know. I run the world's largest water-only fasting center. We fasted many thousands of people. No one's ever turned orange."
Yeah.
It's not a sign of detoxification. It's a sign that you're taking in more carotenes than your liver can process.
Right.
This is a burden on the body. And so juices are heavily concentrated. They're largely oxidized. And there's not a lot of research on this, but I did find one study that looked at a commercial tomato pressing operation. So imagine a large cylinder where in goes many kilos of tomatoes.
Yep.
Like you're making tomato sauce or tomato paste or something. And then there's a large piston that comes down and crushes them.
Right.
Okay? Now, as the piston comes in, what happens to the air in the cylinder? It's going to be pushed out.
Yeah.
Okay. If it were, there has to be a gap between the piston and the cylinder. If there wasn't, there'd be too much friction. But even if it was very, very tight and most of the air was actually compressed, what would happen is it would explode. Not everyone knows this, but diesel engines never had a spark plug or any kind of a igniter. What happens is there's just enough pressure that it causes it to explode. Okay. So the air is forced out. And what they found was that 40% of the vitamin C was lost in 3 minutes.
Wow. Wow. Really? Oh my
3
goodness.
minutes. Yeah. I still see people on Instagram with their 12 or 14 jars of juices.
Yes.
Juices for the week.
Yeah.
5 minutes after you make them, they've lost a considerable amount of their value.
Yes.
Okay. So, I think for lots of reasons, I don't know how much of this you want to get into. And I think it's important to point out that I got a tremendous amount of benefit when I was juice feasting.
Okay.
Initially. And I know many other people have too. And I'm not taking that away from you. I'm not saying you don't get better. You may. I think it's important to understand why. And the reason why is because our magnificent bodies in every moment of our lives are attempting to take our health and vitality to the highest level possible.
Right.
And so as soon as we improve anything, we're going to see a corresponding improvement. So if you go from a standard American diet, in fact, I don't know how wide your viewers are, probably all over the world now, right?
Yeah.
That diet is a standard American diet. It's a standard anywhere diet.
Yeah, for sure.
I've been all over the world. Diets in every country are always a long way from what people should be eating.
Totally.
Grains and breads and
and also, just sorry to interrupt, but also what you just said, even we see people who do like a carnivore diet now who claim, my symptoms got better, I healed my disease. Well, it's because you quit eating all of the other shit that you were eating, right? And now you're just, sorry, I just wanted to say that because we see it. It's not just with juicing. It's with like, anytime you remove all that stuff, you're going to see improvement.
That's exactly right. So, but it's so important to understand because people think, no, this is a magical thing that healed me. No, it isn't. There's no magic, and the body heals itself. And I saw the benefits I got from juicing because I stopped consuming. While I was doing that, I wasn't consuming the garbage I was consuming before. So my body had a better chance to heal.
Yeah.
Okay. But when we're consuming anything, as soon as you put a little bit of lemon juice in your water, almost nothing, or a slice of cucumber, and you drink that, your body says, oh, there's nutrients here. That must mean there's food coming. About a third of your energy gets shunted to your digestive tract.
Okay.
Okay. So there's a lot less energy available if you're consuming anything.
Okay.
Certainly, it's easier for most people to digest juices than the stuff they're normally eating,
Mm-hmm.
but it's completely different from consuming nothing. I mean,
Right.
fasting itself means complete abstinence from all nutriment, no calories, no nutrients. And there's a whole cascade of beneficial physiological changes that occur in the absence of anything.
Right.
So we can't add salt to the water. People, oh, you have to add salt to the water. I
Yeah.
see this on Facebook groups. Well, I've guided more than 10,000 people through the process. We don't ever put anything in the water. It's just
Yeah. And I can't remember where I heard this, but I heard someone talking about it also. If you're a lot of people who, and I'm going to get into the supervision component because,
sure.
now that water fasting is a little bit more mainstream even through intermittent fasting, I think there's more and more people who are doing it at home or attempting to do it at home and failing miserably and using without supervision, sometimes these things can go for an extended period of time and they're running into issues and they don't have that supervision to guide them through.
Right.
And so the use of electrolytes can sometimes be even dangerous. Is that right? Like if you're putting in the potassium and the magnesium into the
Well, it
body,
could be. It could be. I
it
mean,
could be.
if there's an electrolyte imbalance already, then it's
Yes.
really important that you address this very carefully
Mm-hmm.
because if you take in too much too fast or you take in the wrong thing, I mean, let's say you're low on sodium and you take potassium,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to help you.
Right.
It can cause a greater imbalance still. And so it's very important to understand these things.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
it's and I mean I understand. The things that I've heard over the years are, come on, fasting is a natural process. How hard is it? I just yesterday someone tagged me on something on Facebook. I went to look at it, and I wound up reading some of the other comments, and someone was saying, "Well, just stop eating. Like that's all there is to it, right?"
Yeah.
It's a little more complicated than that. I mean, that is, of
Mm-hmm.
course, the bottom line is you have to stop eating or you're not fasting,
Yeah.
but you have to know what's okay and what's not okay. You
Mm-hmm.
have to know how much water to drink because if you're getting too little or too much, you can create a problem for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's I liken it to childbirth. Do you have
Mm.
children?
I had them
Oh,
all at home.
you had them all at home.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Um, that's pretty unusual, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'll often poll our clients at Tanglewood. How many of you were born? When I talk about the subject, how many of you were born in a hospital? Almost everyone raises their hand.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Did
think
you
my
have?
children too were I didn't have them vaccinated either for anything as children. They're all in their 20s now, but so I think it was like the 1% of the 1%, my kids.
Wait. If your kids are in their 20s, you must be at least 32.
Exactly. I just turned actually 33 and a half.
Okay. Happy
Yes.
half birthday.
Yes. I
Um,
started young.
yeah. So I don't even remember where we were.
We were talking about the electrolyte potential imbalances and yeah.
Right.
And you were asking me, do you have children? And I said, yes, I
Oh,
do.
right. Thank you. Yes, exactly. So, did you have support when you gave birth at home to these children?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Most women, I've met very few women who
Hmm.
would deem to, considered okay or safe to go through this completely natural process,
Hmm.
right? It never needed doctors for however many hundreds of thousands of years. And yet most women aren't going to do this on their own without having somebody,
Yeah.
an experienced friend, a doula,
Yeah,
somebody.
exactly.
It doesn't have to be a doctor, but maybe shouldn't be a doctor, as you probably know.
Yes.
Children born at
No
home,
doctors allowed.
children born at home without doctors are much healthier than children born in hospitals.
Yes.
That's for sure, and are
But
much
yeah,
less.
for sure. The support there.
Well,
Absolutely.
that's the thing. I mean, here's a natural process, and the thing is, had it been thousands of years ago, and you lived in a tribe where females from 14 to 25 perhaps were giving birth regularly, it was a common thing that
Yeah.
everybody witnessed. Maybe you'd be okay doing it in your community and wouldn't need any outside help. You didn't have to
Right.
send somebody in, but you probably didn't grow up that way.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, for
How many
sure.
of us do? How many of us grew up fasting for weeks at a time? So, yes, it's a natural process. Yes, it's entirely safe, and animals in nature do it on their own. The difference is that animals in nature are completely in touch
Yeah.
with their own instincts. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things people say is, and I'll tell you a quick and um, cautionary tale.
Yeah.
I had a client who fasted with me about 4 or 5 years ago, young man. He was in law school at the time, very smart guy,
Hmm.
but he gained some weight. He was, I think he was dealing with some depression. There were some issues. And so he fasted 21 days. It was absolutely life changing for him. He came back to me about a year later and said, I'd like to do this again with you remotely. And I said, okay, great. We got it all set up. And then just before we were to start, he said, the only thing is, he said, I don't agree with you about how much water we need. So if it's okay with you, I'm just going to drink when I'm thirsty this time instead of me telling him, this tells us you're needing more water. And I said,
Okay.
no, that's not okay. If you're not going to take coaching, I can't be involved.
Yeah.
So he fasted on his own. He wound up in the hospital for
Mm.
4 months with 2% kidney function from
Wow.
dehydration.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
And I didn't know anything about this. I didn't hear from him for about a year. Then he came back to me, wrote to me, and said, I'm such an idiot. I should have listened to you. But the point is, people say to me all the time, no, I drink when I'm thirsty. And yet we've measured the hydration levels now. We've measured every client now for 18 years,
Wow.
roughly. We've measured more than 6,000 people's hydration level using a sophisticated bioimpedance device. And what we find is that virtually everybody is dehydrated, most
Hmm.
people severely dehydrated.
Yeah. Just
And
as
so,
as a result of our lifestyles and how we live, right?
well, I mean, here's the way, I apologize. I mean, I tend to use this. I've been, public
That's
speaking on this for over
yeah,
25
I
years.
love it.
I tend to use the same bits over and over again.
That's okay.
But you've eaten corn chips at some point in your life, yes?
Yes.
In those last 32 years.
Yes.
So uh, corn chips are pretty dry when they go in.
Yeah.
As it turns out, they're about 2% water. I did the
Wow.
research. When they come out of your body, are they as dry as when they went in?
Right.
You better hope not.
Hmm.
That would be pretty uncomfortable.
That would be pretty
Okay.
uncomfortable.
Bowels and stool is 75% water on average. So they go in completely dry. They come out almost completely wet. Where's the water coming from?
Yeah.
It's coming from your
Taking
body.
from our body. Yeah.
So every time we eat all the foods that people eat. I mean, I grew up in the U.S. eating dry cereal,
Hmm.
toast, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I mean,
Yeah.
how much water is in these foods?
I
Not
know.
very much.
None. Almost none. Yeah.
In nature, every species is eating a high water content diet, and it's
Hmm.
interesting because there's been a trend over the last 5 or 6 years, which killed one friend of mine. Fruitarians thinking, well, because I'm eating a high water content diet, I don't need to drink water.
I've
When
heard.
we
Yeah.
measure these people, they are behind the people who've had a dry fasting practice who are usually terribly dangerously dehydrated,
Wow.
all of these folks. The next most dehydrated group are actually people eating a fruit-based diet who aren't getting enough water. Okay.
Really?
Yeah, I know it sounds hard to imagine.
Wow.
You mentioned mucoid plaque, and I see you've already interviewed quite a few people. I know one of those people is out there telling people this stuff doesn't exist. And
Mm.
yet, having guided 10,000 plus people through the process, everybody eliminates
Yeah.
pounds and pounds. I mean, I had a client who fasted with me for 16 and a half days. He was in his 70s and then had between 6 and 17 bowel movements for
Oh,
4.5 months. 4.5 months.
4.5 months.
Eating, eliminating way more than he was eating. Yeah. I had another guy, a young guy around your age, his early 30s, who
Yeah.
just just recently,
You're my new best friend.
yeah, um, he did a 21-day fast with me. I think we completed it about 10, 12 weeks ago. And I do a 6-week follow-up call with everyone to check and see how they're doing, see what questions they have. And he said to me, I've had 6 or 7 bowel movements almost every day. And he wrote to me the next day after we spoke, since then, 6 weeks later, he said, the next day he wrote to me and said, I had 10 bowel movements yesterday.
Really?
And he
10.
was still limiting this hard, painful, smelly, but this is definitely not the watermelons and papayas he was eating at the time.
Yeah, for
Right?
sure.
As I'm sure, if
Hmm.
you're eating only fruit and soft, tender leaves, your bowel movements are quick, easy, painless, clean, and odor-free.
Mm-hmm.
Yet people eliminate this, this massive quantity of the stuff that's built up in the body. One
Mm-hmm.
woman a couple of years ago, she was fasting at the center with me, and her roommate came, knocked on my door at around 10 o'clock at night and said, she needs you. And I went to their room, and here's this woman lying on her bed sobbing. She says, I just passed what felt like 2 huge chunks of concrete.
Oh
That's
my
how hard this stuff
goodness.
can be. Now, for most people, it's not so terribly painful. Unfortunately, this is tissue back there that heals pretty quickly.
Yeah, yeah, right.
In 3 or 4 days, she felt okay.
Mm-hmm.
But people are moving stuff out that is hard and dry, and most definitely not the fruit and salad they've been eating lately.
Yeah, well, I will actually say that, I actually fell into that for a while because I was eating like mostly fruit, but
Mhm.
not drinking enough water.
Yeah,
And I found myself in the most painful, constipated state ever. And I was shocked. I'm like, how could this be? Like, how
right.
is it possible? So I experienced that. And it just blew me away because I know there's so many people who really kind of say don't drink the water, you just need the H3O and you're good to go.
No,
And
well, it's
I
nonsense.
yeah, I found that. So when it comes to the kind of circling back around to the juicing, is there ever a place for using juice feasting for the purpose of healing
Well,
disease in the body?
I mean,
Like,
everybody has a personal choice. Knowing
sure, in
knowing
your
what I
opinion.
yeah, knowing what I know today, or perhaps believing what I believe today about
Hmm.
some of these things, because some of these things are hard to prove. I mean, I think it's clear, as I said, that juices are inferior to whole foods in
Right.
virtually every way.
So you would
So,
be better off just eating the whole fruit
yeah,
and doing that.
what I encourage people, I talk to people all the time who say to me, I want your help, but I can't fast, at least not right now. For the
Mhm.
next 2 years. I mean, I just had someone write to me. They actually completed their application, and they said they want to come in 2025.
Mm,
Okay.
yeah,
In the meantime, you can start helping your body now, right? Don't wait till then to do anything. Do it
sure.
now. What can you do? Well, what I would have somebody do in that situation is spend a month maybe eating only high water content fruits, nothing
Okay.
else. I mean, honestly, I believe that we should all be focused on high water content
Yeah,
food
exactly.
as much as possible. Um, I love durian. I love
Mhm.
it. We've got a whole bunch of trees.
Mhm.
Um, we have probably 100 jackfruit trees in the ground. I probably have 3,000 jackfruit on the trees right
Wow.
now. But
Amazing.
these are fruits that aren't particularly high in water.
Right.
Bananas have less water than stool, so they're going to be slightly dehydrating.
Right.
If you're eating nuts and seeds, you're definitely not getting much water with
No.
those things. And this is why I recommend you eat them very occasionally, if at all.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, for me, I really don't believe that. I mean, I guess the time, if you have somebody who has a broken jaw and can't eat whole foods, even then I would say you're better off with something blended rather than with something juiced.
Okay.
Because, for 30 years, Shirley, I've been saying, well, what if, or I said for that many years, what if there's essential nutrients that we haven't identified yet that are
Mm,
bound in the fiber?
yeah.
Well, research showed a few years ago there's essential nutrients bound up in the fiber. If you throw the fiber away, you're not getting it. Okay,
Yeah.
so I would say if you really can't chew food, there are some things that are soft enough you might be able to eat.
Yeah.
But let's say you've got a broken jaw and you can't chew it all. Okay, what I would do is I would blend things
Yeah.
and blend them minimally, no more than necessary, because the more we do that, the more oxidation there
Yeah.
is. This is a real issue. We're losing nutrients. We're actually taking in more than we need. We are something most people don't think about. Heavy water. There's water, which it's a small part of every living thing. But when we juice something, we concentrate the heavy water in the
Mm,
juice, and it's not good for us.
okay.
So I'm always encouraging people to do whole foods rather than juices. And again, I got benefit from doing juices, but I'll
Yes.
tell you, I did 120 days on juice, and
Wow.
then I started to really understand water only fasting. I did a week on water, maybe a month later. I couldn't believe how much more powerful that was for me
Really,
than
in comparison.
four
Wow.
months on juices. Yeah. Now, not everyone experiences it the same way, but I think done well, it's incredibly powerful. In fact, credit where credit's due. I honestly, I I hadn't heard of you, hadn't seen your podcasts until you interviewed Jeff, who, as you know, has fasted with me a couple times.
Yes. Yeah.
And here's a guy who's made his living guiding people through juice fasts and selling
Yes.
juicers, and would now tell anyone there's no comparison.
Yeah.
Water only fasting is infinitely more powerful, and that's
Yeah.
virtually. I mean, a lot of our guests, as you can imagine, a lot of our guests are people who have tried drinking juices. They've tried juice feasting. They've tried everything because water only fasting seems pretty radical to most people. And I think you're right. I mean, I think by virtue of the fact that there's now much more discussion around fasting in general because of intermittent fasting,
Yes.
it's much easier for people to understand this.
Yeah,
If
it's a
you can
little more
imagine,
palatable.
yeah, I mean, as I said, I've been doing this now for 27 and a half years. 25 years ago, most
Yeah.
people would go, "What are you, crazy?
Yeah.
Go 3 weeks without eating anything?
Yeah.
That's insane." We still get that response, just not quite as often as we used to.
Yeah, no, I know it's evolved, and it's amazing that it keeps evolving. So, do you feel then for people who are doing juice fasting at home, say for 24 to 72 hours, like say they're incorporating that maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, is
Yeah.
there like a lot of benefit in doing those very short stints of water fasting as opposed to just kind of biting the bullet? Obviously, you're going to have a massively different effect over 21 days, but is there
That's right.
any benefit to doing these shorter fasts?
Yeah, there is some benefit.
Mhm.
But how much benefit there is depends on many circumstances, many other factors.
Yes.
So the people, let me, if I can, let me use an analogy that
Yeah,
I
for
think,
sure.
let's come back to intermittent fasting. I hate the term intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
Um, every single organism is intermittent fasting their entire life.
Yeah.
Okay. What makes this different is what? The amount of time it is. I mean, when we wake up in the morning, well, at some point in the day, for most people in the morning, they have their first meal, whether it's English, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese. It is break fast.
Break fast. Yeah.
You are breaking a short fast, right?
Mhm.
Every single organism is doing this. I mean, maybe there's a few that eat all the time because they have to. Cows have to eat most of their waking hours because they're eating something that contains about a quarter as many calories as fruit.
Yeah. Right.
And they weigh much more than we do. But aside from that, most organisms aren't doing that all the time. And so I hate the term, but it obviously, maybe it's not obvious. It's been obvious to me now for many years that, first of all, the one thing that longevity experts agree on, the only thing, is that
Mhm.
eating more calories than we need isn't helpful.
Right.
So, they talk about caloric restriction.
Mhm.
I don't encourage anyone to restrict. What I encourage people to do is to become more efficient and then learn to understand your body's messages and only eat when you're actually hungry.
Hungry.
But
Mhm.
here's my point. When people talk about how powerful fasting for 16 hours is, or in fact, about just before they rolled out the pandemic, I was
Mhm.
on a flight back from Stockholm where I'd been speaking. This was in December of 2019.
Okay.
And I was on my way back to North America for some talks, to Miami actually. And I saw a little CNN news snippet, and they were talking about the new intermittent fasting scheme that people were finding so powerful. 12-12.
12-12. Yep. Mhm.
I thought, who would benefit from fasting? Like, who would think that
I
was so
know.
beneficial? Well, the
Yeah.
answer is anyone who's eating all the time.
Right.
I had a client once, our first call, I said, "How many times per day do you eat?" And she says, "What do you mean?" And I said, "What do you mean? What do I mean?
Yeah.
How many meals do you have per day?" She said, "Well, do you mean during the day or at night too?" I said, "All right, I'll bite. In every 24-hour window, how many times do you eat?" And she said, 12. And she set her alarm and woke up every 2 hours to
Oh
eat.
my gosh.
She ate every 2 hours throughout her waking hours. She was very, very skinny and was trying to gain weight, but that's not the way to do it, right?
Yeah.
So if someone's
Wow.
eating all the time, if they go to only 12 hours a day, they're going to see big benefits.
Sure.
Okay. But we
Yeah.
have to be clear about why there's so much
Yeah.
benefit. So people benefit from these types of fasts. The people who benefit most, I mean, let me back up one more piece.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just so you know, 31 years ago, 31 years ago in August, I met a woman at a health conference, a hygiene conference. She was the first raw vegan woman I ever met. Because again, there was no Facebook, there was no YouTube.
Yeah, right.
They were spread here and there. And I did what any guy would have done. I hit her over the head and dragged her back to my cage.
Yeah.
I thought she might be the only one.
Any hygienist man would do, of course.
Exactly. we were together. We were together for a couple, 2.5 years, I think, or something. Eventually went our separate ways. But the first time I visited her, she lived in Chicago at the time, and I lived in DC. And I went to visit her, and the first morning she said, "Are you hungry?" Which I interpreted to mean, I mean, why do we have to interpret that? Well, I interpreted that to mean, do you want to eat? I'd eaten every other morning of my life. I said, yeah. So she went and she prepared a little fruit salad and came back with one bowl. And I said, aren't you going to eat? And she said, no, I'm not hungry. I said, right, but you have to eat breakfast. She's like, no, I'm not hungry. And I said, yeah, but breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And she said, Loren, I'm not hungry. And I thought, oh, what an interesting concept. Whoever thought of only eating when they're actually hungry?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Don't you know you have to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Exactly. That's what I grew up believing. That's what
yeah, for sure.
Right. So I thought about that and said, you're absolutely right. I don't know when the last time I was hungry in the morning. I stopped eating breakfast. So I've been doing this intermittent fasting thing for it'll be 31 years in October. Okay. I'm not dissing that.
No.
What I'm pointing out is that there's tremendous benefit to not eating more than you need or more times than you need to. You want to give your body as much time as possible to not have to process food. But we're not seeing a huge benefit from that. Well, it's similar with fasts of 1 to 3 days. Yeah, there's benefit. The greatest benefit occurs for those people who are still making the worst choices.
Right.
Because having a break from those choices for 1 to 3 days, I mean, it's a very superficial cleanse. Yeah. But at least they're getting some of the garbage out of the bloodstream.
Like a little catch-up time for the body, right?
Exactly. Yeah. For people who are already making excellent choices, or, I'm dressing every day a group of people fasting with me right now at Tanglewood. And someone asked me this question last week. I said, well, for you guys, I mean, the average person here is fasting 26 days. How much benefit do you expect to get from fasting for 2 or 3 days? You've already done all the superficial cleansing. Yeah. You're doing deep cleansing that you're never going to get to again until you get beyond 11 days or so.
Right.
So the exception to this, I mean, the time I think it really makes perfect sense is if you wake up tomorrow or next month with a head full of mucus.
Okay.
Or a pain in your knee.
Right.
Or a headache or a fever or anything else, because your body then needs to fast to heal that thing. Okay. But planning it every week, as I did for 2.5 years early on, I finally realized, oh, you know what? I'm actually starting to consume muscle and never getting any real benefit. And I started doing a few days and realized I'm still consuming mostly muscle, because for the 3.5 days to really get into ketosis, and about 10 to 11 days to be fully into it. And I thought, here I am consuming all this muscle mass with relatively little benefit because I'd already fasted. My diet was clean. I thought, no, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, okay? For sure.
If you've got a specific issue to heal, there's nothing better. I can't remember now who once said, Plutarch once said, instead of medicine, fast for a day. Well, in his time, a day might have done it, but he didn't have 5G.
Yeah, exactly.
And Wi-Fi everywhere.
And procedures poked into him and everything else.
Exactly. And exhaust from, millions of vehicles and all this other stuff.
Exactly.
So, today it may take most people a little bit longer than it would have in his time.
Yeah. So it's really just, we can look at these short fasts at home as really, they're just like a little break to allow the body to maybe play some catch up, but you're not going to start seeing any amazing, transformation or healing happen until you really start getting past, like you said, like 10 days, 11 days. Is that right?
If you're doing a regular short fast as part of a whole healthy lifestyle change, including an optimal diet, maybe you'll start to get a little bit further ahead each week or each month by doing that.
Okay.
But it's a relatively slow way to do it.
It's going to be slow. Yeah.
Because again, it takes 10 to 11 days to get into the deepest part of the process.
Yeah.
So
okay.
This is why our average client is doing 26 days.
Okay. That's kind of the general time for most people.
Most people spend at least 4 weeks with us, whether it's at Tanglewood or remotely with me online. If it's online, we send them a spreadsheet. They have to have instruments to measure blood pressure, pulse, temperature,
Hmm.
weight. There's a few other things they could measure. They complete a spreadsheet every day with that information plus other things about what's happened for them, and then we speak every single day.
Okay.
Um, Whether they're with me in person or it's online, the average is 5 weeks with 26 days fasting. But there
Okay.
are very few people who do less than 21 days fasting.
Okay. So do you predetermine or give kind of an estimate when you're doing an intake of the person how long you feel that they would benefit from? And then maybe if you get to that point, say we think you're going to need 21 days, but when you get to 21 days, maybe you're in the middle of a healing crisis or something.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yes and no. I mean,
Okay.
again, to be honest with you, Cheryl Lee, it's evolved quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
When I opened Tanglewood in a pretty big house outside of Washington D.C., I really, in fact, when I first opened, it was going to be a fasting center and raw vegan B&B
Okay.
because I didn't know if there'd be enough people to support
Right.
myself. And within a few years, we were full all the time and wound up needing to move to a much larger facility
Mm.
because we had such amazing things happening. Yeah, I mean,
It's basically like I guess there's a lot of factors that go into.
well, there are many factors. I mean,
Yeah.
what used to happen is people would show up and sometimes they would just say they would actually pay by the day back
Mm-hmm.
then.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as they can want to keep going, they would pay. We got to the point where we had to say, look, we're full.
Mm-hmm.
We're almost always full. We need to know when you're checking out. And
Oh
so
yeah, for sure.
people pre-book their times because the truth is we can't really do it any other way.
Yeah.
It's just not practical most of the time. But here's what happens. People start by completing an application on our website and they may say, I mean, I responded to one yesterday, the day before. It was a woman, I think, who said she wanted to do a week with us.
Mm-hmm.
And she was dealing with significant issues that we see healing all the time, but healing with 21 days or more.
Got you.
And so I said to her, we'd be happy to have you. And if you want to spend a week with us, that's fine. My recommendation is that you spend at least 4 weeks with us if you can.
Yeah.
If you can. So I'm always making that recommendation. And in fact, it goes both ways. We had a woman a few years ago who said she wanted to fast for 42 days. And I looked at her intake form and said, why? You're at you're at an excellent weight, which is not the primary thing people are fasting for with
Mm-hmm.
us, but that's fine. You don't have any significant issues.
Mm-hmm.
You're pretty healthy.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that, but I don't think you need to. My recommendation would be maybe 30 days for you
Okay.
would be better than 42 and a lot easier to, faster to
Sure.
recover from. And she said, no, I want to do 42. On the 30th day, she said, I want to break my fast tomorrow.
Yeah. So it was already, you kind of already pegged that.
Well, and having had as much experience as I have,
Yeah.
in
Right.
most cases, I can get a pretty good sense for
Okay.
how. I mean, honestly, I think almost everybody benefits from doing at least 21 days and probably up to 30. Now, some people are never going to go that long because it's scary to
Right.
people. It feels pretty crazy.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Almost everyone benefits.
So I have two questions. One is, are there any contraindications for people implementing an extended water fast? Like, are there certain circumstances where some people shouldn't
Yeah.
pursue something like this?
There aren't many, in my opinion.
Okay.
That there are people who have gone before who say, well, if you've got liver or kidney issues, you shouldn't fast
Right.
because these are the primary organs of detoxification. The liver is breaking down all the toxins in the
Mm-hmm.
body. The kidney is filtering everything out of the bloodstream. If these organs are already challenged, fasting won't be a good idea. But that's not been my experience, and it doesn't even make sense to me. We are taxing these organs simply by living the
Right.
way we've been living.
Mm-hmm.
Fasting, in many ways, is actually a break for them.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go back to the young guy I told you about, the law student who wound up in the hospital for 4 months, when he came back to me, he told me the story, and he said, "I want to fast again with your guidance. I promise I'll follow your coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Will you take me?" I said, "If you'll take the coaching, yeah, we'll do it." I took him through another fast. Several months later, he went and had a scan of his kidneys, and they said he was back to 100% kidney
Wow.
function.
Yeah.
So we have seen with kidney issues, with liver issues, the body can heal just as well. The primary things that mean it's not a good idea would be if you are pregnant or breastfeeding.
Sure. For
Okay.
sure.
If you're pregnant or breastfeeding, you're going to detoxify so quickly that it's going to be damaging to the fetus or the baby that's nursing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got
But
you.
other than that, I mean, we're not a psych ward. So we're not really equipped to deal with someone who's dealing with really significant mental health issues.
Right.
Like, well, there's various conditions. Some of those conditions we can't really handle. We're just not set up for that. And the only other thing, I mean, we hear from people at least several times a year who will say things like, I was just diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. They've told me I've got, 6 weeks to live. Can this help? And my response is always, I don't know. Every case is different. But here's the thing. If your doctor or doctors have told you they can't do anything for you, I don't see a lot of downside.
No.
We have people healing from stage 4 cancer.
Yeah.
Not everybody. I mean, unfortunately, sometimes it's too late.
Yeah.
Right? But some people heal. So if they've said to you they can't do anything for you, I don't really see any reason not to. Now, in most of these cases, people choose to be with their family and work with me remotely, which is probably just as well, because we don't necessarily want to have the Costa Rican government wondering why people are dying.
Right.
Tanglewood.
Yeah. So sometimes that's better for both parties.
That's right. But that's usually their choice anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
We do take people who are very sick and almost invariably see amazing things happen. But again, sometimes it really is just too little too late.
What about age or gender considerations for fasting? Is it still the same across the board?
There's no gender considerations. People, there are people out there that they're telling people there's this myth that you shouldn't fast while you're menstruating. It's not a problem. We fast women all the time.
Yeah. Or even just women in general, honestly. There's so much now out there talking about women shouldn't be water fasting for more than like even 24 hours because it disrupts the hormones and all of these things. So
no, that's simply not true. We see amazing things happen with women. In fact, it's interesting. YouTube, I think it's still true that more males watch YouTube than females. But I can tell you that until I started a YouTube channel, I want to say, I think March was 12 years ago. It's always March, by the way. We opened in March.
Yeah.
We moved to our current location in March.
Wow.
We started a YouTube channel 2 years before that in March. It took, I think, 2 or 3 years before we had any significant number of viewers on my YouTube channel. But prior to that, between 2/3 and 75% of our clients were women.
Okay.
Now, you may be aware of this. Anybody who's working in alternative health usually has a lot more female clients than males.
Yeah.
And it's not because women are sicker. It's because women are much more likely to take care of themselves.
Yeah. They're more open-minded, generally speaking.
More open-minded,
yeah.
Right. Less set in their ways.
Yeah.
And so we saw a lot of women, and it wasn't until 2 or 3 years after YouTube, which was only like 8-9 years ago in this 27-year history, that we started to see as many men as women. Every once in a while, we've actually had more men than women, but that's pretty unusual.
Okay.
Now it's about 50-50 most of the time. So I've literally taken many, many thousands of women through long fasts and seen amazing things happen in virtually every case. What happens to hormones is hormones wind up getting balanced, not imbalanced. I mean, temporarily,
yes,
perhaps, in the process, maybe, but that doesn't matter. The point is what happens when you're done.
When you're done,
how
exactly.
are you left, right?
Yeah, moving forward. I mean, you're looking at kind of what's behind the, the opening and the expansion for afterwards, not where you're coming from as kind of a comparison point. One other thing, what about, I think there's a lot of talk too around water fasting. And I mean, Jeff kind of broke the mold, or so to speak, when it comes to say 10% body fat, and wondering, well, how am I going to fast because I don't have any body fat reserves, and what's going to happen? And I think I've heard you talk before about like a male who's like 150 pounds can actually fast for like quite a long time.
Yeah. Well, not if they're 9 feet tall.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's if someone's in a height appropriate weight range,
Yep.
nearly everyone could fast for 8 weeks.
Okay.
And I had a guy once who was 6 feet tall, 128 pounds, do 7.5 weeks. I had a
Wow.
guy who was 6'2" or 6'3", 160 pounds, do 7.5 weeks.
Okay.
We had a guy who just 2 years ago in his 70s, I mentioned him earlier, the guy had between 6 and 17 bowel movements a day.
Yeah. Wow.
He had been losing weight every day for 5 or 6 years. And no matter what he did, he couldn't keep the weight on. And the first time I spoke to him, I said, sounds to me like you are completely backed up with this mucoid plaque. You're not absorbing anything. And by the time we did that consultation, he came maybe not quite a year later. When he registered, I think he weighed 110 pounds.
Wow.
When he showed up 6 weeks later at 6 feet, he weighed 101 pounds.
Wow.
Now, I stopped his fast after 16 days because there was nothing left.
Right.
Okay. But he gained weight for the first time. He left us heavier than he arrived after having an average of 7 bowel movements for 7.5 weeks. He still gained weight. And then he went home and 2.5 months later told me he'd have between 6 and 17.
Crazy.
Okay. So we have a woman fasting with us right now. She's a naturopathic doctor. She is doing her 4th fast with me. When she first came to me, she had gone to one of the other places one could fast in California.
Okay.
They told me she was too skinny to fast.
Okay.
She came to me and they told her, eventually a doctor said she could fast 5 days.
Okay.
She did. She lost more weight as a result of that fast, couldn't put it back on because she didn't clear out her, same thing. This is in almost every case when people are way underweight, there's a bunch of hard material stuck in their bodies.
Okay.
We get this out and it changes everything.
Yeah.
So she is now doing her 4th fast with me. She came to me. She fasted 15 days. She would have gone longer. But again, this was during COVID. And what happened was the classes had been suspended. And they notified everyone and said, we're opening back up. And she couldn't miss the classes if she was going to graduate later that year. So she had to leave. But she wound up doing 15 days. When she came in lighter, then she went to the other place and could only do 5. They only let her do 5.
Wow.
In 15 days, I was visiting her city. She was at a naturopathic school in San Diego. And this was maybe, I want to say 2.5 or 3 months after she left us. And she was excited. She gave me a tour of the school. She introduced me to all of her professors as the guy that healed her, which of course is not true because her body healed itself.
Right.
But she weighed more than she did when she arrived.
Wow.
And again, this is someone who couldn't gain weight before.
Yeah. Yes.
So,
yeah.
Now we have a couple guys right now who came in morbidly obese. Okay. I've got a guy doing 42 days. I've got another guy doing 45 days. I've got a guy doing 21 days that probably could have done more.
Yeah.
These are all guys with a lot of excess body fat and losing 2 to 4 pounds per day of fat.
Yeah.
2 to 4 pounds per day. Okay. This naturopath, this young woman who is just turned 31 actually yesterday, loses between 2 and 4% of a pound per day.
Wow. Okay.
So these heavy guys are losing 100 times more body fat than she is virtually every day of the process. And this is why people who are very lean can fast, because the virtually infinitely intelligent body says, oh, okay, you know what? There's no food coming and there's not a lot of reserves. So let's dramatically reduce the rate of metabolism. So you need less food. You need less reserves. You can go much longer. Okay. And this is how we fast underweight people all the time and have them gaining weight after.
Right. Because I guess like really the big part of that is that, like you said, the plaquing and these types of things, there's an absorption problem that until that gets removed, they're never going to be able to put weight on.
That's right. It's going to be really difficult for most people.
Yeah. Now, one thing about weight loss, I mean, for women, typically speaking, generally speaking, they welcome the weight loss and it's an amazing thing. But for men, it's not such an amazing thing, unless, of course, they're morbidly obese. But for the average male who's coming and water fasting, I think one of the fears is weight loss.
Right.
So when it comes to kind of like combining that question with the topic of sarcopenia and how that plays into longevity, there's a lot of talk. These are all kind of like hot words right now. And for people who, either men and women who are over the age of 50, for example, like, keep your lean muscle mass. You don't want to be fasting for extended periods, because now you're going to become sarcopenic. And so what do you say to that? Because I feel like there's a lot buzzing around about that, and it's confusing for people.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, this just isn't our experience.
Okay. Yeah.
We have a lot of people over
Mhm.
50. It used to be that our average client was a 52-year-old woman.
Mhm.
Now, again, we get a mixture, but I've got probably, I mean, I have a mixture right now of I think the youngest person is 22. He's
Mhm.
fasting with his father, and the oldest person right now is mid 70s.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter how old they are. I mean, our older clients usually find that they feel and function better than they have in their entire life.
Right.
Um, when we complete, and again, I mean, I actually think it's interesting when people do much shorter fasts, whether it's 5 days. I book people by the week. So if they spend one
Okay.
week with me, they're going to fast 5 days. If they spend 2 weeks, they're going to fast 11.
Okay.
When someone does, let's say, 2 weeks and they fast 11 days, I think that's harder for most people in some ways afterwards than
Mhm.
doing 21 days fasting.
Okay.
Why? Because with 11 days, they're not going to remove the mucoid plaque.
Okay.
It's not long enough. They're not going to have a chance to heal everything they need to. They start this process but don't have enough time to finish it.
Mm.
Then their body, they're not going to do as well. When someone actually fasts long enough, they feel and function so much better afterwards.
Mhm.
Most people find that they build muscle better, more easily than ever before. Now, how quickly that happens
Mm.
partly depends on what else is going on. So if we go back to Jeff,
Sure.
Jeff, it was similar to the woman in San Diego. I saw Jeff. I planned to see Jeff back during the whole COVID mess. There weren't too many places I could get to from Costa Rica without being injected
Right.
or taking a PCR test, which I wasn't willing to do.
Right.
And so I went to Mexico quite a few times, and that's where
Okay.
he was living at the time. And so I was going to go back there. Before he left us, I said, "Hey, I'll be there in a couple months." He said, "Well, great, let's get together." So we arranged to meet. We met at a fruit stand one day, and the first thing he said to me when I walked in was, he said, "I haven't gained a pound since I left you." And he was quite underweight.
Right.
He's 6 feet tall, maybe a little taller than me actually, and weighed about, I think, 100 and I don't want to misquote. I'm not
Yeah.
sure,
But
but
he was pretty lean.
he was very, very underweight, very
Yeah.
underweight. And he said, "I haven't gained a pound." And I said, "Okay, how many bowel movements are you having every day?" And he said, 5 or 6, if I remember right. I said, "Okay, how many meals? 2 or 3?" I said, "Okay, so you're still eliminating old material." He's like, "Yeah, it's stuff that's
Oh,
hard."
yeah.
Okay, so look, normal bowel movement's about half a pound.
Mhm.
But if you're removing stuff that's really dense and hard, it's going to weigh more than that.
Yeah, right.
And if you're having 2 or 3 of those bowel movements every day, you could easily lose an extra
Yeah,
pound.
that's adding up.
You can't put body weight on that quickly.
Mhm.
There's not enough. You couldn't eat enough calories to do that.
Right.
And so, I mean, he was actually holding steady. He hadn't lost any weight. He just hadn't gained any.
Mhm.
When he finally stopped having all these hard bowel movements, his weight started to take off.
Wow, okay.
And I saw him. I've seen him a couple times since he moved to Bali. I've been in Bali, and he now weighs 25 or
Yeah.
30 pounds more than he did.
Yeah.
Okay. That only started to happen once he stopped eliminating old hard material.
Okay. Got you.
That's the key.
Mhm. So there's a lot of emphasis put on breaking the fast. Like, I know you have a calculation for however many days you actually do the water fast. There's an equation for how long the refeeding is. Is that right?
Well, yes and no. I mean, we don't actually use an equation anymore. What happened was many years ago, 20 some years ago, I was trying to figure out how long people actually needed.
Uh-huh.
And I sort of came up with something. We don't plug numbers in again because we're normally working with
Right.
fixed. If it's 1 week, this is what you can do. If it's 2 weeks, So with a 21-day fast, which is usually the shortest we'll do, it's 1 week of refeeding with
Okay.
21 day fasting. So it's a 4-week process.
Okay.
With a 5-week process, one can fast 26 days and do 9 days of refeeding. So it's 35. With 6 weeks, it's 30 and 12.
Okay.
And this works really well for the vast majority of people. Every once in a while, 1 or 2% of the time, when people are very, very lean, they sometimes do better with more refeeding time.
Okay. Now, do you make obviously some recommendations and put an emphasis on what they're eating prior to beginning the fast? So like,
Absolutely.
and how long that might be, so that they're not just coming off of eating crappy food and then coming to Tanglewood and starting their water fast the next day. So what does that look like to prepare for something like this?
Yeah, I encourage everyone to spend at least 3 or 4 weeks eating as cleanly as possible.
Okay.
And what that means, my opinion about that is mono fruit meals, right? Focusing on high water content fruits.
Right.
The staples. I mean, right now for people in North America, you've got watermelon and other melons.
Yeah.
You've got peaches and nectarines.
Yep.
And not the other members. I mean, if I'm not saying plums and apricots, it's because they have a lot less water than peaches and nectarines.
Right.
In the citrus family, you've got grapefruits and pomelos, not the other members. You've got, if you can get good papayas, pineapples, which again, they may not be hard to get, good ones sometimes in the US, but these are both very high water content fruits. Strawberries, most berries, not blueberries, they're low in water, but the other berries are all pretty high. Any of these things are fine. And simple green salads. So again, lettuce, not kale, not cabbage, but lettuce, because lettuce is much easier to digest. Tomatoes, cucumbers, red, yellow peppers if you like them, not green, they're not ripe. A little bit of avocado, I'll use a whole avocado in every salad. I eat a big salad. For me, the simpler it is, the easier it is to digest.
Okay, and you're looking for like at least 4 weeks prior to them coming.
I'm encouraging people to do 3 or 4 weeks. To be truthful, some people don't do that.
Yeah.
Some people refuse to or don't feel like they have enough willpower. Sometimes we'll get people that say, I want to come tomorrow. And I'll say, okay, it would be great if you had some time first. And they're like, no, I want to come now. Okay.
So you just start them.
And we have started people who had a steak and potatoes and a beer and a cigar last night.
Wow.
They're still okay.
Yeah.
It's easier if their diet's cleaner.
Yeah.
And they've got less garbage parked in their system. And I'll tell you, again, a cautionary tale. We had a woman, she was in her 30s, she was still studying. We had this conversation about how to eat optimally for at least a month before coming. She showed up and she began fasting and was super nauseous every day. And so after about 4 or 5 days, I said to her, what did you eat before you came? And she looked kind of sheepish. She said, well, to be honest, for the last 3 weeks, I've only eaten donuts.
Wow.
That's not a good idea.
Yeah. We are not recommending that.
No, we're not donivores. Yeah. I had another guy who many years ago, this would have been 15 years ago, told me that times have been hard. He owned a little convenience store somewhere in the mountains, and he said things have been difficult. I've lived on white bread only for the last month. It was like he had a bag of cement in his intestines.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So
it definitely is a lot easier. It's going to be a lot less painful. And I think it's important. If you start further ahead, you finish further ahead.
Yeah.
You get more benefits. You get more here. You start over here.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It just makes the experience, you're getting more out of the experience and you're coming there. You might as well get them, you're making that sacrifice. You might as well make it the best it can possibly be. Right.
It's amazing though, how many people, honestly, the hardest part of this process for most people isn't the physical symptoms. Okay. In 32 years, I'm sure you've had a cold or a flu.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
You've had some physical symptoms.
Yeah.
The hardest part for most people, if they take my advice, what we're encouraging them to do is to rest as completely as possible. And I think this is really important. And again, I realize, almost probably everything I've said here and will say is controversial. In
Sure.
other words, there are people who would argue with it.
Of course.
Um, Everything I teach and practice, as I sort of alluded to earlier, is based on my best efforts to understand and apply the laws of nature to our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So 25 million animal species is estimated. Virtually every one of them, when sick enough or badly enough injured, will lay down and stop eating. What do they do? What does your dog or cat do when sick enough?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Nothing. They
They
lay
don't
down.
move.
Mm-hmm.
They lay down. They don't get on Facebook. They're not looking at Instagram. They just rest.
Yeah.
Okay. The less we do, the more benefit we get. So you definitely want to do as little as you possibly can. But, again, some people are so unwilling to deal with their emotions that they look for ways to keep
That
themselves
is my
occupied.
next question.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I appreciate the physical aspects of water fasting and how absolutely transformative that can be. But I know there's also that emotional component, which I love talking about, that,
Yeah.
For a lot of people, until they actually start looking at those things, I mean, it can be such a roadblock for the physical healing as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everything is connected.
Yes, everything's
You
connected.
cannot heal physically as much as is possible if you haven't dealt with the emotions.
Mm-hmm.
There's the mental part, the physical part, the spiritual part, the emotional part. It's all connected.
And in your experience, when someone's taking on an extended water fast, are these emotional issues, for the most part, just organically coming up
Well,
during the fast? Or is it something that you really have to work with people to kind of allow them that space to be able to kind of bring it up and out so that they can unpack it and resolve those things?
right. Yeah, it's a great question. Again, I've set Tanglewood up so that we minimize distractions as much as possible. If
Mm-hmm.
people want to distract themselves, it's always possible.
Yeah.
We do have an internet lounge where you can get online, but there's no Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is harmful.
Right.
We're not gonna. I've never lived with Wi-Fi. I don't want to.
Okay.
We're not going to do that. But you can take your laptop or phone in, use an adapter to plug into the Ethernet, and you can get online if you need to. We make the little cubicles not too comfortable because we don't want you spending too much time there. We don't have classes and activities all day because we want you to rest as much as you can, just like your dog or cat does when it's sick. Okay, that's what's ideal. And so if one is willing to be as quiet and still as possible, suppressed emotions are going to start bubbling up to the surface.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. The truth about this is that, and you're well aware of this, I'm well aware of this, young men typically, not always, there's exceptions, but typically young men are far less emotionally mature than young women.
Yeah.
The only segment of the population that has a problem completing the process with us are guys under 25.
Wow.
About 50% of them run away within a week or two. And I think, they always have their grandmother died, that's the third grandmother or whatever. They always have some good reason. But I think the truth is that they're simply unwilling or unable to sit with their emotions. Because if you get quiet and still enough, they're going to come up to the surface.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like, this whole topic of numbing out, I mean, we numb out through everything now. It's just everything's a distraction.
Right.
And I can see that with the younger males, especially just kind of wanting to run away when everything's kind of been taken away from them in that sense. But also, I would be curious to know about like men like above the age of, say, 50. Like in my experience, oftentimes men can get very set in the notion that, men don't show their feelings, they're armored up, it's not, you're not in your masculine if you're showing emotions. So I wonder sometimes if when these emotions start coming up for that age group, if there can be some kind of a pushing down, which could affect or potentially change their direction of their water fast because of those heavy emotions that they're not allowing to come through.
Well, fortunately, we don't see this being a significant issue. Most of the time.
That's great.
I think what happens, even guys who are in their 50s or 60s or 70s or even older, and we've had our oldest client turned 91 while fasting for 3
Wow.
days.
That's so
Yeah.
cool.
And completely eliminated a stage 4 tumor.
Wow.
Um, I think most people, by the time they've been on the planet for 5 or more
Hmm.
decades, have enough wisdom and experience, even if they've never sat with their emotions, they can.
They can.
They don't tend to run away from it.
Yeah.
They're okay with it. They're able to do it and go through it. And some people still avoid it,
Hmm.
but I think most people actually do a reasonably good job of
Yeah,
sitting with
for sure. I think
it.
after you get over, once you get over the age of 50, it's kind of things start to look a little different, and maybe things that were important to you before that need to distract were more drawn to more solitude and more, maybe a little bit more introversion and these types of things that can
Yeah,
lend itself to that healing process.
agreed. Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you incorporate any, I know the answer to this, and I was going to say, do you incorporate any dry fasting, which I'm sure you don't, but do you recommend dry fasting at all,
I
ever?
don't.
You
I
don't?
don't.
Okay.
And again, I know this is a very controversial subject. My take on it is based on several things. I mean, first of all, the logic behind it. I think it's important to understand that the benefits that accrue to us accrue because we're not eating.
Hmm.
I've seen no logic or science to support the idea that we get benefits because we're not drinking. In
Yes.
fact, in fact, water is the universal transport medium.
Hmm.
So we have 5 primary channels of elimination from the body,
Hmm.
right? When we're detoxing through the urinary tract, we're detoxing through the colon, we're detoxing through the skin, through the breath, and through mucous membranes,
Hmm.
right? And each of these channels depends on having sufficient water.
Hmm.
Without enough water, nothing really can move very well.
Yeah.
And so where people are really getting into trouble, both with not drinking enough water and especially if they're also dry fasting, is they actually wind up damaging their kidneys.
Right.
Because as the kidneys are carrying the garbage out of the bloodstream, if there's not enough liquid there to dilute it, it's actually scarring to the kidneys.
Which is so funny because actually so many people start dry fasting because they think that they're going to actually
Right.
kick the
They're going to
kidneys
filter.
into
They're going
gear
to
to,
filter.
yeah.
Yeah, it's silly.
Yeah. Okay, so I just have a couple more questions. So, what I wanted to, and this is maybe more of even just like a statement, maybe, but a lot of people are going to come to a facility like Tanglewood to reverse health conditions,
Sure.
to reach a higher state of health.
Yeah.
And the reasons that got them to that place in the first place is from poor, healthy living, from poor choices, for the most part, generally speaking.
No, absolutely true.
Right. So, can we treat, I mean, we see people going into rehab for alcohol addiction and drug addiction and these types of things. So, I thought, because as a society, most people are extremely addicted to food, then coming to some place like Tanglewood could be treated almost like a rehab facility for the addiction of food,
Sure.
through, rather than going to, a clinic where they're giving you methadone or something to get over your addiction to heroin. You're going to implement water fasting to overcome these addictions that brought you there in the first place. Because don't you agree that for the most part, it's our food addictions that are bringing us to this state of health,
Yeah,
generally speaking?
absolutely. No, there's
Yeah.
no question about it. I mean, there's other factors, of course,
Hmm. Yeah.
including genetic factors, but the genetic factors play a much smaller role than most people think they do.
Yeah.
We have nearly complete control and can create an amazing level of health
Hmm.
if we're willing to make the best choices. And
Yeah.
the issue is that, again, my experience is that even people who are eating perfectly, sometimes for decades, the longest we've seen, I think, was 22 years eating what I would call a perfect diet. And yet they came and fasted, and it was life changing
Wow. Yeah.
because we don't get this garbage out of the body. We can't detoxify nearly this. I mean, in 21 days of fasting and a week of refeeding, that person accomplished more than they did in 22 years of eating a perfect diet.
Wow.
And we see that sort of thing all the time. But there's no question. It's poor choices.
Hmm.
Food is probably the biggest one
Hmm.
because we're directly putting toxic stuff into our bodies.
Yep.
Obviously, whatever we consume, drinking, smoking, drugs, all these things have a huge impact on us.
Mm-hmm.
How much sleep we get, how much exercise we get, whether we get enough sunlight or not. These are all big factors. But
Mm-hmm.
I think what we consume, by far the biggest one.
Right. And then much like coming out of a facility where you're being treated for something like alcoholism, and so you need to not consume what led you to the facility in the first place. So I would imagine a lot of the education when people come to Tanglewood is around making better choices, following, the more hygienic principles when they leave,
Absolutely.
so that they don't have to come back and constantly be implementing these long water fasts.
Well, that's right. And I think it's important, today, I stopped supporting what used to be called the American Natural Hygiene Society.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the International, excuse me,
Yeah.
National Health Association.
Mm-hmm.
I stopped supporting them because every conference there was way more cooked food than raw.
Mm.
The last conference I went to, they actually had cheese sauce on vegetables.
Oh my
and I
goodness.
thought, I'm out of here. I mean,
Yeah.
they're not getting any more of my money.
No kidding. Yeah.
So I think it's important to understand that it's not just hygienic. I mean, again, for me, I've learned a lot from Shelton
Mm-hmm.
and TJ Fry and many other TC Fry and many other
Fry.
people. But if I have to choose between what Shelton said and what nature is telling me, I'm choosing nature every time.
Sure.
That's where the real wisdom comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's no species on the planet that doesn't get sick if you feed it cooked food.
Yeah.
Right. There's a natural diet, and this is a significant mandate. I mean, even people who are eating a raw vegan diet differently than I am are much better off than people eating cooked food.
Yeah. And it's really, I guess, that reconnection to what, just like creatures in natures know what to do. Exactly. We've come so far off the path and so far off the chain that that we've so lost touch with what that is. But through fasting and through, eating the living foods and getting enough sunshine and all of these things, then we can start to develop that awareness again to make the right choices, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the truth is that, almost everybody would probably be better off if they spent an extra month or two with us to really cement the new habits.
Yeah.
But most people can't do that because they've got to go back to work. They've got responsibilities.
Yeah, right.
They've got things they need to do. It can be challenging for people. Again, there's an hour of education every day. They get a written document from us that reminds them of what belongs in the body and what doesn't. Mm-hmm. I handle every question and objection. It's not like this is it. It's like, let's discuss this. Why do you think we should be eating this? And we'll go through all of it. People leave us. I mean, surprisingly, most people still get nutrition advice from their doctor, who probably had 1 3-hour lecture.
Yeah, I know.
Our clients leave there with a tremendous amount of information and education. But unfortunately, some people simply dismiss it because they don't want to change.
Yeah.
And some people find it hard to not give in to cravings, which still will come up as they're eliminating old hard material. As we rehydrate this stuff, we're going to start reabsorbing into the bloodstream, and we're going to crave whatever was in there.
Sure.
And the stuff that's stuck in the body, 100% of the time, isn't the remnants of apples and oranges.
Oh, yeah. True that. So I always finish my my interviews with the same question for everyone. So I'm going to ask it to you. And the question is, what is your authentic life print? What is your unique expression in the world as Loren Lockman?
I'm not even sure how to answer that question. What is a life print?
Authentic to you, because there's only one of you. There'll never be another one of you.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I think in my case, I think it's easy to see. I've created something that is unique in the world.
Yeah.
At one point, you said places like Tanglewood. There isn't any place like
Tanglewood. No.
Tanglewood, really is. It's amazing. Our clients tell us it's the most beautiful place they've ever been. It's so. I really believe. I mean, it's an interesting question. Again, it's the language that threw me a little bit, but I truly believe that every single person has genius, and that every single one of us is capable of manifesting things that no one else could manifest.
Absolutely.
And so, I think Tanglewood is part of that for me, significant part of that. for me.
Yeah.
It's very much a reflection of who I am. Um, I've been totally involved in every aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
That will change. We're actually going to be expanding
Oh,
and
wow.
looking at sites, probably two more sites around the world at some
Oh,
point.
wow.
We're moving in that direction now. Up until now, it's really depended on me. And after 27 and a half years of working pretty much all the time, I mean, I'm grateful because I've
Yes.
been able to do something I'm passionate about, but I'd like to have a little time to finish a
Yeah.
book I started 10 years ago and haven't had time to finish.
Right. Yeah.
And,
Have a little me time.
exactly.
Yeah.
Spend more time body surfing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's important.
So, but there's no question. I mean, it's a complete reflection of who I am and
Yeah.
what I believe, and there's probably much more to come, but I think that's it. I mean, I'm not sure if you want me to be more specific.
No, that's beautiful. I love
Okay.
it. It's beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on today.
It's a pleasure.
This has been an amazing conversation. And I think it's really shed some light on, you know, a deep dive into water fasting. And so I really appreciate it and appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. It'd be a pleasure to join you again anytime.
Okay, Loren. Thank you.
Take care,
Okay,
Shelley.
bye.
Bye.